How are you doing, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're going to be diving into some running back tiers and rankings for Week 10 fantasy football, covering all of the matchups for my top 30 players at this position group, again, for Week 10 action. So, of course, as always, if you're new around here, feel free to drop on down, smash the subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content here. Today, we are also posting my tiers and rankings for the receiver position, and we've got must-start player videos, trade advice content, and other stuff up on the channel for this week. So feel free to check all that information out, and let's dive into today's episode. All right, so just like I did last week, we're diving straight into the elite running back ones tier. These guys are the best of the best. We know that. We can debate the order that these players are placed in. Of course, left to right is how we move for the numeric rankings. I just simply don't have the access to things to put up numeric numbers and stuff on the screen for you guys right now. I apologize. We'll work for that, and hopefully next season or maybe down the road this year. But that's how it's going to be for today's episode. So left to right, move that way. I will announce the number of overall player we are at the top of each tier. But number one, starting off here, Saquon versus Houston, one of the best matchups for opposing running backs. CMC off a bye week against the Chargers, another incredibly juicy matchup for running backs. Austin Eckler taking on San Francisco. Not a great matchup. We know he's going to be used highly, especially without, or at least what looks like to be the lack of presence of course, Mike Williams and most likely Keenan Allen as well, barring some sort of late turnaround to his week's practice schedule. Derrick Henry here at the Denver Broncos taking on Denver here. This is a decent matchup. I feel very comfortable about this. Of course, last week we saw Derrick Henry do absolutely monstrous things, against the Kansas City Chiefs in a matchup where I was shocked they kept so close in that one, but showing they're able to do so. And then Nick Chubb here taking on the Miami Dolphins. Another player coming off of a Week 9 bye week, should be refreshed here and ready to go. So with that being said, let's dive into the strong running back ones tier and the players we have at that position group. All right, next up here, I'm going to dive into my running back 6 through 9, kicking it off with Ken Walker, and the farthest travel distance of any NFL team in league history, traveling from Seattle, Washington to Munich, Germany to take on the Tampa Bay Bucks this week. Now, this matchup looks tough on paper, historically, at least to the last few years of NFL. However, with this year, this Tampa Bay run stop is not the same as we've seen it in years past, and Ken Walker has definitely asserted himself as the really most potent part of this offense that has been producing at a very high level this season. So super comfortable and confident in him here. Josh Jacobs and the just all-in turmoil Raiders taking on the even more turmoil-ridden Colts. This could be an interesting matchup if the Jeff Saturday experiment becomes a disaster in Game 1 here, a short turnaround, having to play at least, it's a normal week for these guys, but turning around into a new regime of a guy who is a consultant at best for this team, it's a lot to read into here. This Raiders offense has been struggling. Josh Jacobs is coming off of a modest and then before that a poor performance. So I am going to give him a vote of confidence this week. I do think that, for all the Raiders' struggles, they should be the more buttoned up team here. I do expect the ground game to have some success in what should be on paper a tough matchup. But at the end of the day, I do trust that this Raiders team will get the job done here. Alvin Kamara taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I love this matchup. Pittsburgh's defense has underproduced so far this season. Of course, they're still without TJ Watt, and that's been the big story of their season thus far. But for AK, he's been phenomenal outside of last week. It was a pretty down game for him, and they struggled against the Baltimore Ravens, but I do think they bounce back against the Pittsburgh team that is a far inferior opponent. And then Travis Etienne, the one concern I have is game script here. They're 9.5-point underdogs on the road at Arrowhead Stadium. However, Etienne's a skillful pass catcher, so even if they get behind in this game, he should still have some utility catching passes out of the backfield and contributing to the offense in that way. So really confident and comfortable in these players this week. Let's dive into the bubble running back ones tier. All right, so the bubble running back ones tier are my running backs 10 through 12 for this week, kicking it off with Dameon Pierce against the New York Giants. Now, I've seen some concern in other videos in the comment sections, and obviously the injury report is kind of a scare for Dameon this week. He's on the injury report with a chest and shoulder related injury. I'm going to play it kind of day-to-day here. It is Thursday when you're seeing this video. I'm recording it Wednesday evening. So For right now, we don't have a ton of information except for the fact that limited practice participation in him obviously being a little bit nicked up here, but I do think that if he's out there, they're going to use him in his prototypical workhorse fashion, give him a high level of rushing attempts, hopefully finds the end zone. He did not last week against Philly. Not a super easy matchup, but I do think that with the amount of work there and the amount of success he's had running the ball effectively this season, that should be considered a constant going forward here. So I'd be rather surprised if, of course, if he's able to play, to see his workload limited a great extent here. Dalvin Cook against Buffalo. This matchup is a really tough read right now, but what we do know is that Buffalo's run stop and overall defensive unit has been very solid and strong this season. For that reason, I'm a little bit hesitant to put him in the strong running back ones tier, thus the reason he falls down. Even if Josh Allen's not on the field, even if we see Case Keenum be the starter for Buffalo, I just have my reservations about a Dalvin Cook player that's had a hot touchdown streak going here in stretch of games where his productivity has been really dependent on his ability to either find the end zone, and his ceiling, of course, this is a standard thing here, but his ceiling, of course, is very reflective of having those multi-touchdown games. So for Cook, it's been a bit troubling for me as of late. This team has shifted a little bit more to a pass-happy dynamic than we've seen in years past, and that's fine. I'm not trying to knock Dalvin Cook here, but I do think that if the matchup gets tough here and they start to fade the run game, you're going to see a situation potentially like last week where he kind of needs that receiving touchdown where he got in the back left corner of the end zone against Washington that bailed out his game, because without that touchdown, he was looking at slim pickings for overall points. And then Miles Sanders here this week. This is a tough read for Miles every single game here. Whether or not he's going to get a super high amount of opportunities, whether or not he'll get the goal line work, or if Jalen Hurts will pull the football on read option and take it in himself. Miles, though, what I will note, had his worst game of the season at 4.9 fantasy points on the road at Washington in week 3. So keep an eye on that. This is a matchup that I expect to be kind of dicey. This could be a boom or bust situation, thus the explanation for him being in the bubble tier this week. All right, my running backs 13 and 14 in the elite RB2s territory, starting it off with Tony Pollard against Green Bay this week. So Ezekiel Elliott's status is still kind of up in the air for Sunday, at least at the time I'm recording this episode. And I think overall this just bodes towards Tony Pollard having one of those games where he's going to have the closer to the higher end on the range of his overall use in a week-to-week basis. Now, this is a player that has not seen more than 15 touches in any game. So you're talking about a guy who kind of has a firm ceiling on his usage. It's not like Zeke being out there, or not out there rather, versus him being limited is going to have a huge impact on Tony's involvement, because we see kind of a cap around 12, 13, 14 carries, and then they'll get some targets out of the backfield as well. So for Tony Pollard, he's an extremely explosive back. This is the type of back that Green Bay struggles against here. And the Dallas Cowboys are road favorites by 5.5 points the last time I checked that number. So you're looking at a team that's expected to be a heavy favorite, again, considering the fact that they are the road team here. I think he'll be very efficient in this game. I think Green Bay's battered up defensive unit, losing their best player on that side of the ball, Rashawn Gary, last week, is going to be in shambles here, and give an opportunity for Tony to have quite the solid game. And then playoff Lenny here. It's clear that it's not the postseason yet, because he is really struggling in the regular season. I think it was when I was looking at, yes, I've got the analytic actually here written down in my notes. He has averaged under 3 yards per carry, so literally in the range of 2+ yards per carry with a cap at 3 weeks in a row, and has under 10 points in 2 of his last 3 contests. So showing the inefficiency struggles and the touchdown dependency, the reception dependency for him this season. It's been a brutal stretch. This offensive line has not provided him with the work he needs or the opportunity for space that he needs, and overall he has not capitalized on the opportunities that he's had frequently either. So this is why you're starting to hear some rumors about Rachaad White. We do have Lenny as a must-start player this week, but overall there are things to be concerned about here. Seattle, thankfully, is a weaker team against the run and tends to allow fantasy running backs to exceed their weekly scoring average. Next up here, the strong running back 2s tier, just 2 names as well. These are my running backs 15 and 16 for this week. Aaron Jones kicking it off against the Dallas Cowboys. Could be higher, but the ankle injury has some skepticism factored in for me. You're only sitting Aaron Jones let's be honest, this week, if you have an absolutely loaded running back core or are in a super, super thin or shallow league format. We're talking like literally, 6 to 8 man leagues. But that's really not the point here. I do think that if Aaron Jones' ankle is able to go, this is a tough player and he'll grit it out. And they frankly need him. I mean, what else do they have besides Allen Lazard and A.J. Dillon, who has been actually quite inefficient this year because all they do is just wham him up in between the guard and center gap, so the A gap there. So for Aaron Jones, plain and simple, as a dynamic threat, they need him to touch the football. If he's healthy, if he can play, he is going to in this matchup. Dallas's defense is very good here, but again, I wouldn't be surprised to see them lean on him heavier in this matchup than they have at any point this season if his body can handle it. That is a big if. These ankle injuries can be really shaky here and really impact performance, but I am, holding on to a grain of hope here for Jones' status for this week. And a player I actually love in this week's games, I really contemplated tossing him up even higher. You're going to see Cordero Patterson's game results before you see this episode. This is being recorded. I made a mistake earlier in the episode. I said this is being recorded Wednesday evening and posted Thursday morning. It's being recorded Thursday evening before the games. The receivers video will be as well. We're about an hour and a half away, so I'll have plenty of time to do that. Cordero Patterson, this video is being recorded Thursday evening, posted Friday morning, so post Thursday Night Football. I apologize for jumbling up my weeknights there. The days just kind of blend together here, but at the end of the day, Cordero Patterson, I love in this matchup. Carolina is averaging opposing running backs to exceed their weekly fantasy point per game totals in terms of their average production throughout the season. And CPAT's coming off of a 17-point game in half PPR scoring on a 39% snap count percentage. Additionally, news we've gotten today, it's going to rain in Carolina. That means ground and pound. You're going to see option football for Marcus Mariota. Might be kind of risky business. I'll make a prediction here. Someone's going to fumble some sort of a mesh in this game. We'll see. We'll see again. Not really sure if that's going to happen or not. Just throwing that out there as a bold, random prediction of the day. But you do have Cordero Patterson in a situation to be the lead back. His second game back off the IR. Loving the situation here. I could look like a total idiot if he sucks in this game. Either him or Tyler Algier will succeed. You're going to see both of the guys in the tiers episode today. But I'm especially bullish on CPAT for this week's matchup. All right, so I actually added a tier this week called the solid running back twos tier. So we've got the bubble RB2s. Usually it goes from strong to solid, of course. I added this, though, because I felt that Jamal and Foreman, there's a significant gap in my expectations for them versus CPAT and Aaron Jones. But then there's also a significant gap between these two players in the way that I view that bubble tier as well. So I kind of wanted to distinguish that in a little bit of a more specific manner. Yes, you could make the argument I could do that in certain spots at other points in the board, especially that elite RB1s tier. Maybe, you could make the argument to peg one or two of those guys hanging on to the 4 and 5 rankings for this week down a notch. But at the end of the day, this just felt right to me. And again, we didn't really talk about those players either, so I'm not really trying to make a strong argument there because, again, we do know who the best running backs are, at least on paper, every single week. So for Jamal and Deontay Foreman, I'm expecting very solid floor value here. That's why we named the tier the solid running back twos tier. Jamal Williams is coming off a season-high 61% snap count percentage, and DeAndre Swift is coming off a season-low 16% percentage. So if that indicates anything to me, it's that you're probably going to see another week of Jamal Williams leading the backfield. And even so, he's having a phenomenal season. This is a guy who is vulturing touchdowns, being productive when given opportunities to touch the football. And we've seen him numerous times on below a 50% snap count percentage go for double-digit point totals in a single matchup this year. So I'm very comfortable and confident this week in Jamal against the Chicago Bears on the road. I would not be surprised to see him get another high-touch game. He had 24 rushing attempts alone for 81 yards last week. And then Deontay Foreman, the other side of the Thursday Night Football matchup, another must-start player for this week. Actually, I have all three of these guys, I believe, from CPAT to Jamal to Deontay Foreman, my running backs 16, 17, and 18 as must-starts for the week. Loving the situation for Foreman here again. Expecting rain. Could see more work than we're accustomed to seeing, of course, and not really sure what's going to be the overall backfield distribution. I should actually check in on Chuba Hubbard's health. The last time I did that was earlier this morning, but we hadn't seen anything new related to him at that point in time, so I will fill you guys in on that before we get into the next tier here. However, for this situation, again, the rain, the fact that the Atlanta Falcons allow opposing running backs to exceed their weekly averages, Foreman's average in terms of the 3 games without without McCaffrey has been phenomenal. Lots of confidence in him for this week's games. Okay, so I literally just went and looked, and he is still just designated as questionable, so not an official ruling. For that reason, I'm going to keep him off of the tiers for today's episode. Just the uncertainty factor. If he is playing, he's probably a top 30 back this week. We will see, though, it's an ankle injury. So, as we've seen, those can be very pesky, and you never really know how it's going to turn out for their overall usage, especially him missing multiple games and coming back here potentially for Thursday night. Again, you're watching this after it's already happened, so not too much reason for me to spend a lot of time diving into that. But for this tier, this is my running backs 19 through 24, starting with DeAndre Swift, who is realistically only up here because of his talent. We don't know how much touches he's going to get this week. We don't know his level of opportunity. If his workload is going to increase, stay the same, I highly doubt it could decrease here from 16% of the snap count percentage. But he's been effective when touching the rock. It was 6.5 points on 5 touches in that game, so over a point per touch. That's pretty dang good. He's efficient as a pass catcher. He can every once in a while just slip into the end zone there as a receiving threat, or every once in a while get a goal line carry as well. There's a lot to like, and I think that, at least from an upside perspective, the floor is very low here, and that's why he didn't really deserve to be on that tier with Jamal or Deontay Foreman. Deion Jackson, another kind of cloudy question mark for this week. So the news I do have for you right now is that as of Wednesday and Thursday, Jonathan Taylor has practiced. He's been seen and spotted practicing on the field for the Colts. That's encouraging. But again, ankle injuries, pesky, frustrating stuff. Like, it's really different for every player. Is it just a standard grade ankle sprain? Is it a high ankle sprain? We don't really know the true definition of what this injury is or isn't at this point in time. So for Deion Jackson, he could start this week. He is actually also having a questionable tag entering into this week's matchup. So the Raiders matchup I like a lot. I do think that it makes a lot of sense as well in a first game for Coach Jeff Saturday to not get too complicated, not get too fancy, turn the freaking ball around, hand it off 30 times this game, 35, 40, however many offensive snaps you get, turn around and hand it off over 50% of the time. So whoever is the lead back should see some nice opportunities. If it is JT, you might see some kind of dual back split type situation where both guys are getting reps just because they don't want to run one guy straight into the ground or risk re-injury. So all interesting things to look at here. However, Deion Jackson has had some success in games where he has had the opportunity to start this season. James Conner, tough matchup this week. Rams hold opposing fantasy running backs to below their average coming into the matchup against them, so or at least that's the norm that they have done this season. So expecting a little bit of an underproductive game from James Conner, kind of going back on my word from earlier this week, expecting him to be right around the corner from his fantasy resurgence and kind of re-breakout establishment here, but that was before I looked at the matchup. So not something I love here. James Conner, though, did have a 71% snap count percentage in his first game back with the team. We will see if the production follows. David Montgomery, great matchup against Detroit this week, has had a 71% snap count percentage in back-to-back contests. Love to see that. It's just kind of streaky and inconsistent as to when we're going to see a high dosage of Khalil Herbert, which, of course, means bad news for Montgomery's weekly fantasy stock. So keep your eye on that. He's a low-end RB2, though, with a lot of upside because he's a talented player. You've also got Justin Fields vulturing touches as well. And then Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. here. Two guys wearing different jerseys, but in the same backfield. We don't have an updated Jeff Wilson Jr. headshot just yet. We did get the CMC one in here this week. Also waiting for a J-Rob one. He's on bye week. I expect him to have one after this week's bye, hopefully. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Just know they're both 49ers. And Jeff Wilson, in his first game post-trade deadline, outsnapped Raheem 49% to 47%. Also outtouched him 12-9 and had a receiving touchdown. So I've got them neck and neck here, still giving a very, very, very paper-thin slight precedence to Raheem. But if the trend continues from last week, this may be Jeff Wilson's co-backfield that he kind of leads. It's murky water here. Both of them, though, are low-end RB2s for this game, and players you're probably, unfortunately, going to have to start as my RBs 23 and 24 in 12-team formats this week. Last up here, my running backs 25 to 30 for Week 10. Kicking it off with Najee Harris. Now, this seems like extreme disrespect to put him this low in my literal RB3s ranking portion of today's episode, but between the matchup and what we've seen this season from Pittsburgh's offense and, frankly, Najee Harris, the running back, I don't see how I can put him higher. At least with Miami, you know you're getting offensive production and movement of the ball and chains from Tua in the passing game. With David Montgomery, Justin Fields has broken out, getting this team up and down the field inside the opposing defense's 20-yard line. Pittsburgh, it's a wishy-washy mess. They've got New Orleans this week, a defense that struggled against a running quarterback last week. That's to be expected. That's a historical problem they've had. And this week, they're not going to have it with Kenny Pickett. And guess what? He just lost Chase Claypool. Doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it's a piece of talent and offensive playmaking out of the situation. So, hate the matchup. The Saints' run stuff has been tough for years. It's slightly eroded over time, still solid. The Pittsburgh offensive line still sucks. They are still trash. Najee Harris will continue to have inefficient play. He will need a touchdown more than ever this week, and I stay away. That's all I got to say. Unless you're playing in a 14-man format or have absolutely zero receiver depth in a 12-man league, please do not start him. Khalil Herbert here. You never know when he's going to pop off. This is a guy who, if you look at his numbers, has had multiple double-digit, spurts this year where he's been insanely efficient, been productive, ripped an explosive run. You literally hear guys talking about him as the best running back in this backfield. The snap count percentage still indicates that it's Montgomery's lead offense here. And, of course, this last game or two has pointed to that as well with the overall level of opportunity distribution. But Herbert's a talented player. If you're super desperate, it's a nice matchup. You could stream him and maybe find something there. Antonio Gibson saw once again the snap count percentage swing his direction. Now, what's really interesting for me is he had a 58% snap count percentage, which was higher than Brian Robinson. Gibson had 14 touches, though. B-Rob had 15. So still a fairly even distribution of work. However, the play time is starting to go back in Gibson's favor due to pass-catching situations in terms of the skill set they want on the field. Devin Singletary this week could see himself, I would argue, get into the bubble running back 2s tier if Josh Allen's ruled out. The reasoning for that, this team's going to be more dependent on true, pure offensive run game with Case Keenum in the lineup than they would be ever with Josh. And that's something to at least keep your eye on for me. It's Minnesota, and it should be a competitive game regardless. But I do think that at the end of the day, of course, no Josh Allen means less passing volume, and you'll see a bit more of the running backs touching the rock. Tyler Algier, I kind of already broke him down with CPAT, our running back 29 this week, a guy that I think can have a nice game alongside Cordero, especially if this game becomes the all-out ground and pound fest, which it very well could here. A.J. Dillon, last but not least, taking on Dallas. The only reason he makes the top 30 is simply because this team lacks playmaking. They need guys to touch the rock. And if Aaron Jones can't go, that makes him a startable player. I don't have extreme confidence in the way he's been used so far the last 6 or so weeks of the season. I don't love it. This team doesn't get inside the 5-yard line very frequently. Therefore, there's minimal rushing attempts. It's been a disaster, and it's been a rough road for the Packers this year, but there is some upside, of course, as always, with most of these players in the RB3 territory every week. No floor. Not something you're getting, not something to depend on. So, there you have it. Our top 30 running back tiers and rankings for Week 10 fantasy football. If you guys enjoyed, as always, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what type of content you want to see next. Also, your questions are always welcome down below. We have a community Discord server where you can hit us up and ask any advice you're looking for as well there. So, check that stuff out, and I will see you guys in the wide receivers episode. Peace out.